Hello, hello. Here we are at our next episode from my podcast Entdecke deinen Hund, which in English means as much as discover your dog. And I have a guest today, a special guest. And without me introducing her, I would like you, Alice from Belgium, just introduce yourself. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, first of all, hi. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Um, so, Els Vidts for Free Dogs. I started my educations in the humane sector. I worked and I still do work partly as a physiotherapist. I studied manual therapy, then I studied osteopathy. Later, I also studied sensory integration for children. And doing all those studies, I eventually realized that it's not really what I want to do. I don't want to be stuck in an inside room treating people whole days. And I've always been very fond of dogs. So actually, just as a hobby, I started studying dog behavior and did few educations, and then I changed my profession and became a dog behaviorist. But I'm still glad that I have my background as a physio and in that sector, and that gives me a bit of a different look at behavior. I put the body and how what I see in the body and how also how they communicate. I put that very central to how I observe dogs and how I evaluate behavior. Um, Also through my work as a physio, I came in contact with sensory integration. That seemed very interesting to me, and to my surprise, it wasn't yet studied in dogs. So I started that study, and well, that led to now being really enthusiastic about sensory integration for dogs, making workshops about it, educating people about it, making courses about it. This year, there will be the first edition of the sensory integration trainer course for dogs. So this is something that um, really it took my understanding of dogs to a whole new level.
Mm.
With sensory integration, I can. It's a first of all, it's a fantastic tool to assess dogs' behavior. If you understand how they process the sensory information, then you actually know how they function
Mm, mm,
from a behavioral perspective. So that's what I love to do.
mhm.
Um, from that, I developed also self-regulation in dogs because that is very akin to sensory integration. And now I also have courses for professionals to guide play sessions with dogs, as I find that is absolutely play among dogs and especially puppies is one absolutely necessary for their neurological development, and two, it is also the best way to teach them self-regulation and the best way to teach the humans, the owners, because I put the owners always central in changing the behavior of the dog or educating the dog. And for me, it seems to be the best way to help them to understand how to put rules, how to put cons- um, constraints, there's a better word to um, how to tell them what are the rules for correct behavior and what aren't.
Mhm,
So
mhm. Okay.
that's that's what I've been doing the last couple of years.
Okay. Good. And so today you're kind enough to give us some of your time to talk about sensory integration mainly. Um, One of the reasons is being that you will be coming to Austria at the end of June and sharing more of your insights and more of your learnings on SI. And so today we just want to maybe give you an idea, or the listeners an idea of what it is about, and yeah, just give an impression. How long have you been working with dogs? Like if you put a number to it, 11 years, 10 years, 15 years?
Um, I Free Dogs is going to be 11 this year.
Okay.
Before that, I was working with other colleagues or
Okay.
in dog schools.
Okay. And in all this time, in all these years, who have been your teachers when it came to dogs? Who have you learned from?
I started my education with Graz,
Mhm.
and I've been doing so many workshops with international and national dog trainers.
Mhm.
Amber Batson has been uh, one of the vets
Mhm.
that I actually had in my dog school quite often to come and give courses on dog behavior. I must say, I sort of left that side a bit to what it was. It was my start,
Mhm.
but I do feel like, especially since developing sensory integration, that I have taken clearly a different route. Um, and I also take a bit of a distance from some ideas that I learned from my initial teachers
Mhm.
and which I also adopted, but which I now actually have different views about, as we all do, as we all
Yeah, of course. We all have
develop
different
and
preferences.
progress.
Yeah. Mm. Okay. Which makes sense because, like you said, you are, I don't know if anybody else in Europe or in the States or wherever does so much on SI as you do. I don't know anybody. Maybe you know better if you have colleagues out there who are in the same level right now, but I really don't know. So it makes sense that you would say you took a turn somewhere because
Yeah.
otherwise you develop, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
not that I know. I haven't
yeah,
found any literature or courses or people who are
yeah, yeah, I haven't either. Mm, mm.
since I've been doing this, there are other people who are picking up
Yeah,
on it. What I often see is that they work um, with enriched environments, which is
yeah,
it's not sensory integration therapy.
yeah. It's different, right? Yeah, yeah. That's very popular actually. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, sure.
Um, and what has been your most significant learning experience during your time as a now call it behaviorist, physical therapist for dogs, trainer? Do you remember? Does anything stand out as far as that kind of put a switch in your head or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, of course, it was the most important thing was when I was starting to try out sensory integration exercises, because that was the make or break time,
Yeah.
right? That was I was starting to experiment with these exercises, and if they would be successful, I would likely carry on. If those would have been unsuccessful, I wouldn't be sitting here now talking to you about sensory integration. So a really important case that that I worked on from the very beginning was a doggy that had been poisoned by she had eaten rat poison. She had eaten rat poison. She had survived, luckily. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working with her. Um, she had been in the hospital for quite a few days. It had been really touch or go. Um, but then she was given the all clear of the doctors, but the owner said, no, she's absolutely not okay. But her blood work comes back all right, and they can't find anything. She also took the dog to a holistic vet, and the holistic vet also said, like, what I could feel then, because I still do sometimes hands-on, just sensing the body. And in osteopathy, we learn to sense the fluctuations of the cerebrospinal fluid. And that needs to be a nice waxing and waning of a type of motion. And that dog had like a constant hyper fast vibration. And to me, it felt like, in a way, this dog was actually walking on a tightrope. And I didn't dare to do any hands-on therapy because the slightest input from me could set our,
Yeah.
falling into a crevice, but in a way of speaking.
Mhm.
And the holistic vet came to the same conclusion. She did her diagnosis, and she thought, like, I don't dare to give anything because she will most likely respond badly to whatever we do, because she is in such a dangerous, but she keeps a balance, but it's so difficult. The whole organism is doing so much um, work to keep a very, very very difficult type of balance in the whole system.
Mhm.
And she was actually coming to me because she was just following her sister. Her older sister came, also a dog, of course, came to me for some hands-on therapy.
Okay.
Um, and when we gave the sister a break, we started to just let her do some very simple exercises, because in the beginning, just approaching a mat would already be an exercise for the dog. That would be so super scary. So because the owner only afterwards asked whether I could see the young dog as well, and see what we could do. First, I thought about hands-on, and then I said I don't dare to do it. And I suggested that we try exercises. I offered it for free because I thought, I really don't know what I'm doing here, or which way this is gonna go. But let's start with some exercises. And so that's when I did the sensory integration exercises, how I developed them as well, how I developed how you should do it, how you should interact with the dogs when you give them those type of exercises. And that's how I was able to stabilize her autonomic nervous system.
Mhm.
And so she went from a dog that um, just being awake during the day, and having her naps, but not doing anything. She couldn't go for walks
Okay.
because that would extremely stress her. The most she did was a treat search in the garden, which was without any difficult stimuli. And then around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that would be her day. She was absolutely that tired. Um, and then we eventually were able to get her to be able to function like a normal dog.
Okay.
Not that took quite a while. I think that took about like half a year of regular exercises,
Mhm.
but that was the most significant.
Yeah. But you must have seen progress quite soon after you started. Otherwise, you wouldn't maybe have continued and really stayed on it, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like the fastest progress we saw was that she could be calmer in the house, that she wouldn't be so reactive,
Okay.
because she would also, I mean, if she was lying somewhere and in the other place someone was getting up from their chair, she would lunge.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so it was about finding a new balance in her autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
That's what those exercises did for her.
Okay. Okay. And was the red poison poisoned her system in that sense? So that, because she was physically, you were saying the vets were saying they gave her the green light sort of thing. She was healthy again, but
Yeah.
still, was it how did her autonomic nervous system get damaged? I don't know. Do we know that or I don't know?
How do autonomic nervous systems get damaged in general? This can be like an emotional traumatic event,
Yeah.
and and it can be a physiological traumatic event.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as the emotional trauma can be in the past, so it's not there anymore. It's not causing the problem, but the neurological functioning can remain in a traumatic state. And the same is with physiological trauma. So it can be brought that much out of balance that it can't regain its normal balance and its normal functioning.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah. Um, on your website, on your course description, I think for your online course, it says about SI, it says it will transform how you view and address canine behavior.
Mm.
I thought it's a really interesting statement, a big statement also. And maybe you could explain a little bit what you mean about this. What is this transformation that you're talking about? What do you mean by that sentence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's what it did for me.
Yeah.
That's what it did for me. And it made assessing dog behavior so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
So much easier. I'm like for instance, it is now very clear for me to say whether a behavior is caused by it is literally a behavioral issue or if there is actually a physical issue behind it. Because of sensory integration, because of understanding how dogs process their sensory stimuli, that distinction is now really easy to make for me.
Uh-huh.
So what do we learn with sensory integration? You really start to look at behavior from the perspective of what makes a behavior,
Yeah.
just like what makes a movement. Right? How do you come up with behavior? Well, first of all, you need input. Behavior is output, right? There is no output unless there is some input, right? And when you can really define to the detail what that input is, and you see how the dog reacts to that input, then it's so easy to understand where the output comes from and also how to change the output. Because if you understand the input
Uh-huh.
and you understand the output, then that means that you have an idea about how it's being processed.
Uh-huh.
So, for instance, but take this weekend. We had a young dog that came into the workshop and very, very fast movements, very direct approaches to the people, immediately into their face, not particularly polite, not what you'd like to see. And we do some exercises. His attention span is like really, really short. His movements and his hind limbs are wobbly.
Uh-huh.
When I get him to do exercises for that, that helps him to focus.
Uh-huh.
But still, his attention span is short. And when the exercise gets a bit too difficult or he moves his head, he falls off and he can't do the balance exercise. Okay. All of that gives me so much information about why this dog is behaving the way he is behaving and what I need to do to get that to change. Because he's wobbly in his body, that means that from his body, he's constantly getting the signals that he is wobbly. Okay, even if you're not consciously aware of that, it means that a lot of information is constantly reaching your brain, which it always does. But if it's about being unstable, it's like an alarm function.
Yeah.
It's an alarm function constantly in his brain. Of course, that will elevate his arousal. Yeah.
Yeah.
For a young dog, that's already a very important thing. They need to learn to regulate their arousal levels. Now, he has an extra challenge because it's not just the external world which keeps his arousal up. It's also his internal stimuli
Mhm.
that are constantly keeping his arousal levels too high. So his behavior, I can't see it separate from his behavior to, oh, there's something moving over there, and now there's something catches my attention there. He doesn't have any control over that. The external stimuli are just dictating his behavior. when something passes. And this is what you expect from a puppy when they are in puppy classes and a fly passes or they're off.
Yeah,
Before
sure.
they know it, their body is actually moving because the external stimuli dictate their body. Yeah. Now, this is a 14-month-old dog. It should be better. It
Yeah,
shouldn't be like a puppy,
yeah, yeah.
right? But he was exactly like a puppy. Attention span like really short and constantly. But put hormones into that mix in an intact male, and he's reactive to other dogs. Yeah. So considering all of that, I need to help him to get a grip on his arousal levels. I need to help him to be able to choose which stimuli are important for him so that he can concentrate on him. And more importantly, that his behavior can be shaped towards the stimuli that he chooses.
Mm-hmm.
Now is just the environment that is choosing his behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, well, this is an example of how to see behavior from a different perspective. And also now I know what I have to do for him. I need to make sure that he can actually bring his focus to himself.
Mm-hmm.
This is your reference in all your situations. This is your reference, your presence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to help him to draw his attention and to get him to be more focused on him. And of course, I then also need to make sure that this becomes more stable. And all of that is done with sensory integration exercises.
Yeah, okay. And I don't know if anybody sees the video. As you said, this becomes more stable. You're pointing at his hips and his back. Yeah, lower back. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
At the stuffed dog that we have in front of us.
yeah.
Yeah, good. And I've seen, of course, some of the things you've done. I've seen a lot of the things you've done. You've been here last year, and we did some stuff together. And you work a session. Looks like you have planks, you have elevated planks, you have platforms, you have yeah, all kinds of different, mainly planks and platforms, I would say, plateaus,
Yeah, you could say that, and
angles in different shapes,
boxes in different
boxes.
shapes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now somebody who sees it might say, well, as a physical therapist, sometimes when you go to physiotherapists, they also do this sort of exercises where dogs step up on things, maybe on a wobbly something, where they have to keep their balance. What makes SI different from physical therapy, this type of physical therapy?
Okay. So since I've also been educated as a physio, I can
You know
exactly
exactly.
tell you what is quite different from physiotherapy and sensory integration. When I had my education as a physio, and maybe it has changed because that has been a while, we looked at behavior, at movement, which is a type of behavior. But anyway, we looked at movement and we decided what muscles weren't strong enough for that caused this type of behavior, and what muscles we need to strengthen to get a different, better, stronger, more coordinated type of movement. Now, when I look at it from a sensory integration perspective, well, I should add, this is what I learned in physio, and then I come to osteopathy, and in osteopathy, what they all say is muscles are the dumbest things in your body.
Okay. Okay.
They are just the dumbest thing. The only thing they can do is contract, and they only do it when they are told to do so. Okay. They don't even relax actively. They just stop contracting. So the only thing they do is contract. So from an SI perspective, we can ask ourselves, okay, contraction is output. What is the input that we need to get to proper output? Yeah. So I want to train the brain to get to proper movement. And if the brain is constantly dictating the body to properly move and properly coordinate, then those muscles that weren't working before are going to work now. Hence, they are going to get stronger. Yeah. So that's the big difference in how I see changing movement now in a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't use wobbly things in SI, right? You everything you use
I
is
don't.
and
Yeah.
yeah. Why is that? Why do you? What's the difference there?
Yeah.
Things to be stable.
What I want to achieve for the dog in the sensory integration exercises is that he can focus on the input that he is getting. And that is already a difficult thing for a dog that needs sensory integration exercises. So I want all the information that he gets to be very clear and very clear reference for the dog. So if a surface is wobbly
Uh-huh.
and or has round edges or not well defined edges, those won't be very clear references for the dog. Yeah. I want to put him in a situation where I can give him certain input, certain sensory information, which he can actually reach for and be certain, have that sensory information as a certainty,
Uh-huh.
so that he can concentrate on how what how he can position his body, how he can be in a relationship with that information. When that information is constantly changing, and I already have a dog who has a difficulty with arousal management, I make an exercise like at an Olympic level where I'm actually working maybe with a toddler, so to speak. So it's not where I start. It's definitely not where I start. And when I go eventually move on towards things that can move, I make the dog aware that he can move those things. So it might be a zigzag plank or a zigzagging plateau. And I put him on and I teach him, like, if you shift your balance, you can make this thing move. So again, it's about him taking a very clear position in the environment on top of the things that he's in contact with, and referring to himself and to his own point of gravity in the example of shifting balance, to have an influence on the environment around him, making the plank shift.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And now I was just thinking of, okay, let's say when you work with kids or with children and you bring them into some sort of playground and you see all kinds of things there and obstacles, kids are usually like, hey, this is great. I want to climb up or try it out. I want to do all this and that. With dogs, not so much, maybe. I mean, maybe you have some adventurous dogs who may, but most dogs kind of like sniff around and look at this and a little bit more hesitant, maybe. And also, when you work with dogs, maybe you have a dog who's more confident in stepping on things, and then other dogs will step on something and say, oh, get startled and like, no, thank you, I'm walking away, I don't want this. What do you do to motivate dogs anyway to work with you?
Yeah. So you're right. When I have children come in my training hall, they're immediately on top of everything. When there's a new dog coming in, they have free offline access to everything, and they will sniff and maybe they will pee on my stuff, but that'll be it. That's mostly it. So I do need motivation to do exercises which are also going to be difficult. Right? I need to search on the right amount of difficulty for the dog, otherwise they will not progress. So I do use rewards. I do use treats.
Mhm.
As you know, I always use pate or anything that they can lick from my fingers.
Yeah.
When they lick it from my fingers, I have so much more feedback. I have feedback on how fast they lick or whether they use some teeth with it or not. They can be longer engaged with me because they can lick as long as they want. Some dogs lick really long when you think like, my God, even my skin is almost gone. So there's definitely no pate left, and they keep licking, but that's good. That's good. And I allow them to lick as long as they want, because when they do that, they put themselves much more in the parasympathetic system of our autonomic nervous system. And that's the area where they will be able to concentrate. They will be able to manage their arousal. They will be able to find their balance emotionally, mentally, and then also physically.
But it's not the same. Again, when you think of dog schools, a lot of dog schools have also some sort of obstacles and platforms and put dogs on it. But a lot of times you see trainers or owners luring the dogs across a platform.
Yeah.
But it's not
Yeah.
the same. You don't lure them. What's the difference there, the way you do it?
See, I sometimes have dogs that are agility champions. And then when I actually test them in my sensory integration on simple planks, and they do the catwalk at high speed. But if I then ask them to do something consciously, then it becomes a whole different thing. So you can't lure them, because then it's like the carrot in front of the donkey.
Mhm.
The donkey is just looking at the carrot and only focused at the carrot, and the body unconsciously is following the carrot. So I don't want a dog to unconsciously follow the treat. I do want them to use their brain, otherwise I'm not going to get better sensory integration. So it's very important to communicate with my body language. And then the dog communicates with me. Oh, Else, you're walking over there. Yeah, just a minute. I'm going to figure out how I can get there. All right, this is how I'm doing it. All right, Else, I'm here. You can treat me now. Good. All of that is very important, because again, this interaction is, if they do that, if they interact with me and they communicate clearly with me, then they are not too high in their arousal.
Yeah, that's the focus also. Yeah. And you have already talked a little bit about having very keen observation skills. Now that doesn't really just happen overnight, I'm sure. Also, you had to practice, I'm sure. Um, I mean, I can ask you, how did you learn to become such a keen observer? But I guess by observing makes sense. But maybe what else besides just observing?
Well, I believe that what's been really important for my observation skills is the hours of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hours and hours of meditation, but also of course being an addict at observing movement
Mm-hmm.
in all types of creatures.
Mm-hmm.
When I pass people who are jogging, I'm always analyzing their movements.
Okay. Okay.
It's just, yeah, my thing. um, and then of course also my osteopathy training,
Mm-hmm.
where it was about tactile observations,
Mm-hmm.
tactile feeling the body, feeling the minutest movements that are present in the body, like the fluctuations of the cerebrospinal fluid. That is such a minute
Yeah.
movement that you can feel. It's a lot of training to do that as well. So it's not just training in the visual observation, it's all types of observation.
Yeah.
And joining that together again helps each different type of observation to evolve further.
I guess it's really, like you said, we're observing with all of us, all our senses, so most of our senses.
Yeah.
The visual.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, already you mentioned a little bit the connection between SI and self-regulation and sensory integration, and the connection that actually was a question I was thinking about as well. Because nowadays, of course, everybody talks about impulse control. It's a very popular term being used. Self-regulation, not used, at least in my field, is not used as much yet. I don't hear that many people saying it or many people using it. In German, it's a very similar word, but still not many people know what it is. But it's not the same thing, right? Impulse control and self-regulation is not the same thing, because that's my I guess concern is that people will just say, well, it's the same thing anyway. But where's the difference? Where do you define the difference between those two?
When you control an impulse,
Mm-hmm.
the impulse is still there, but you keep it under control. You suppress it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you push yourself to do something else instead of that.
Yeah.
You redirect your behavior. Yeah. With self-regulation, it is not a suppression.
Mm-hmm.
Self-regulation is okay. Let's give an example about impulse control. You have puppies playing among each other. One puppy is bigger and stronger than another puppy, and he could easily bully the smaller puppy, right? Impulse control would be he still wants to do that. He still wants to do that, and he tries harder to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or he then maybe runs away and go and bites the leash, or go and pull at some grass, as you sometimes see them do out of frustration.
Okay.
With self-regulation, and then specifically in puppy play, I will teach them the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I will teach them the rule like, we don't do that. We don't bully smaller or any type of puppies. And the way I will teach that is that he can actually make that rule his own rule. Like when we go to the shop, we don't steal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because it's the rule of the shop. It's because it's my rule.
Yeah.
It's not what I do. It's not who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't need someone to walk next to me to hold me back from stealing.
Yeah.
There's no way I will do it. Yeah. And that needs to be the same for the puppy who is stronger, and he just it's his rule that he doesn't want to annoy the other puppy. He doesn't want to scare the other puppy. That is self-regulation. So, and that's a huge change. It from a neurophysiological level even.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when he is not annoying the other puppy, he is using his neuroplasticity. How can I get to play with this puppy without scaring it away and still having the pleasure of playing for myself?
Yeah.
Right. So he needs to use neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Instead of building up his frustration, he's actually going to get more oxytocin and serotonin because he gets to play.
Which was he wants to do anyway.
Which is what he wants to do. And so that's a huge change in his brain. First of all, he has used his neuroplasticity, because the only feedback I will give is not that.
Mm-hmm.
You do not jump on with your whole weight on a much smaller puppy. Not that. Find something else, but not that. And so he needs to use his neuroplasticity. And it's a whole different way of telling them what to do. Right? If you tell them what to do, or you give them another option, it's still not their brain coming up with another option. And this is exactly what they need when they are young. They exactly need to have that type of feedback so that their brain can develop in that way, that they see many different options in one situation. That is a brain exercise. If we are there and we then tell them like no, or we put them back on the leash so that we give them some constraints that they can't do it anymore, or we put a barrier in between, all of that will make sure that the behavior doesn't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But this dog hasn't learned to look inside of his brain and find other options.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing for self-regulation. Self-regulation is about keeping your arousal level in check, because the higher it is, the less you have choices about the options of your behaviors. And well, the second thing is, as I just said, finding different options. So it's management of arousal, which is a relatively low function in the brain. It's limbic system, but also reticular formation. And then finding other options is development of the cortical area. And that needs to develop after birth. So this is how we should be educating young dogs and adolescents and adult dogs who haven't had proper development in terms of self-regulation.
Yeah, makes sense. I was just thinking of I had a puppy. This is, we're talking about 20 some years ago. My first puppy that I had on my own. Not
Mm-hmm.
dogs I had before, but family dogs always. And I remember it was a boxer puppy, Tony, and he was quite active. And now, of course, obviously, I didn't know then what I know now, and the way I look at things now is a little bit different. But I remember him just being really, like me, being overwhelmed with his activity level. And let's say I had known you then and you had known back then what you know now, and I would come to you with a puppy who is so hyperactive, let's call it. How would SI help? Like what kind of, just a couple of examples maybe, what kind of things would you do with this dog, with this puppy who was whatever, 4 months old or not?
Yeah, 4 months old, I think it's very important that they play among other dogs.
Yeah.
Very important. But, and this is, as you know, a huge but, that play needs to be guided by someone who knows what he's doing or she knows what she's doing and who gives proper feedback to the dog, to the puppies. Proper feedback means the right feedback is something that helps them to adapt their behavior.
Mhm.
If your feedback is coming on too strong and they get scared, their arousal level is going to go up. Well, they're not going to better self-regulate. Being afraid is not self-regulation. Is not coming up with better behavior. If you give a type of feedback that is not understood by the puppy, it will also go into frustration. Because what you're adding is a puppy that is overwhelmed with all the sensory stimuli from the environment and from inside of his own body. Because when you move as much as a wild boxer puppy can do, there's a lot of stimulation from your own body, which is also overwhelming you. And all of that needs to be organized.
Yeah.
So how can we help them? Proper feedback. And then again, understanding sensory integration helps you to find which feedback is correct for him or her. We tend to go towards vocal, so auditory feedback for the dog. That is one type of sensory information, which usually doesn't work really well unless you go very strong and you actually scare them. Yeah. But very often that is not what helps them to develop self-regulation. Once they have a baseline, a foundation of self-regulation, vocal feedback, auditory information for them can actually help them to get towards their self-regulation if it's already existing at a certain level. But if they do not have that, what I work with mostly is tactile feedback, giving them so when they are moving forward onto another puppy, I might give them just on their chest, on their sternum, a short and quick pushback so that they also move back a little bit. But I'm not holding them back. And that is a very, very important difference. If you hold them back, they're not choosing to stay back.
Yeah.
They are restricted to go forward. Now that will most of the time just increase frustration. But if I give them a little impulse away from that other puppy, of course, when this let's say he's a boxer puppy, when this boxer puppy is very new to that type of input, I'll have to do it like maybe 5 times in a row. And then it'll start to dawn on him like, hey, whatever I do, I'm not getting closer to that puppy. But I'm not restricting him. I'm just each time giving him a
Yeah.
quick pushback. And what you see happening each time is that eventually they're like,
Figure it out.
what is actually happening here? What is actually going on? And then they calm down because they do that, because they reflect about, hey, what is actually going on? Why aren't I getting closer? They start the reflection, right? This is already good. This is already where I want to have them. Because if they are reflecting, they are already lowering their arousal. My input was, because of repetition, it eventually was being noticed. Okay, good. Now that it's being noticed, what does your brain do with it? Okay, and then I continue to go in that communication. And when I see that there is calm and he wants to go off again, I will allow him, because I give him the benefit of the doubt, but I will be his shadow. I will be his shadow. And if he notices that I'm his shadow, again, that in itself is great, because he notices he is paying attention to something that had a specific meaning, because we just had a conversation, we just had a communication about it. So I follow him, and you're like, oh yeah, that woman again. She actually doesn't want me to jump on that puppy. Oh yeah, okay. Maybe I can find something else to do. Yes, wonderful. Good job, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of things. I mean, when I think back of this boxer puppy of Tony, it's like, wow, so many things. I mean, it's such a wonderful dog, but yes, so many things, of course, I didn't know then, obviously.
Yeah,
So,
as we all
as we
this
all exactly, yeah.
as we all do, and this is why many people get into dog training and dog behaviorism, because they want to understand their own dog better.
Yeah.
Same for me.
Yeah, same for me actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. I have a couple more questions that I want to ask you. Yeah, one of the things I was thinking is, okay, for trainers or also for dog owners, that what is being offered on the market as far as training, courses, methods, approaches, there are plenty. There are plenty of things out there for everybody to kind of get confused, I guess. And some things might be questionable and some things are great or whatever. But anyway, so to think of SI being fairly new to people's minds, or to getting into their conscience, I guess. Why or is it, I guess, a little provocative maybe, is SI really necessary, or is it just another trend for us to say we have something new now? Let's try this. What would you say if somebody says, is it really necessary?
I think you can't do without SI, whether you realize it or not, because you always have sensory processing.
Yeah.
So that in itself is definitely not a trick. I mean, there is you can't actually live without having sensory information reach you. And you do literally die if you don't have any sensory processing happening. So that in itself is absolutely not new.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been as old as life.
Yeah.
But of course, just realizing, just understanding the concept of it, because it is always there. It's not just a fad. Sensory processing happens always, and this is how brains develop, because they start to process more and more sensory information and put it together in adaptive ways. So that in itself cannot be a fad, because it's part of life.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to become, well, especially I hope that for children, it's going to become part of kindergarten. It's going to become part of their normal education, that teachers are also going to be more aware of sensory processing and how children are normally processing their sensory information that comes to them. I have this boy next door, and he's being diagnosed with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, at school, they gave him something to bite on,
Okay.
right? Because, oh, when you have ADHD, you need to be able to fidget. Sure, but if they would understand sensory integration, they would have noticed that the boy never chooses a tactile fidgeting. Never that it includes his mouth.
Yeah.
What he actually searches is pressure. When he has, so I have helped him to be able to start reading, because he had difficulty with that, because he had difficulty concentrating. So I don't ask him to sit still
No.
when he needs to concentrate. And what he likes to do is he likes to put his arms in his t-shirt and then start to put pressure on his t-shirt.
Okay. Okay.
So he is looking actually for pressure, right? So if only at schools they would understand and give him the proper sensory stimulation that for him is adaptive because it helps him to focus. Well, you can imagine that it can be very interesting for puppy education as well if we are just aware of those things. And one puppy will need to chew on something, another puppy might need to have pressure, not. And also, this is something that's very typical when people want to calm their puppy, how they are stroking it,
Yeah.
like really fast moves and very superficial, because this is what we like as tactile
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
of their. We like to feel it. We like to feel our puppy in that way. But what does it mean for the puppy? You often see puppies going like, oh, trying to get away from it. You're actually punishing them,
Yeah.
right? And you're overstimulating them. If you would just give it a squeeze, or if you're stroking it, do slow strokes, but with more pressure. That is actually much more likely to help your puppy to calm down. So, it's quite simple, but it's just a different way of looking at what is actually going on.
Yeah.
And
And also,
brain,
as I was thinking of, it's not training in that sense, because if you think of dog trainers who are interested in this edition, let's say,
yeah,
it's because a lot of times we do counter conditioning or conditioning and training and so on. But this would actually be something that has to be like SI, it has to come in before all this, I think. Before you start
yes,
any sort of training, really,
yeah.
let's say.
Before there is a conditioned behavior,
Yeah.
there needs to be the input, and how that input is actually processed, whether it is, there's a filter between everything that comes in and what actually reaches our consciousness, or what actually reaches the parts of our brain that have us respond. And if that filter isn't working properly,
Mhm.
and this is one part of sensory integration, filtering the information that comes in and putting it in correct perspective. If that filter isn't functioning well, the behavior is going to be off.
Mhm.
And this can be without any conditioning.
Yeah.
So you don't have to counter condition those behaviors. You have to make sure that the filter works properly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, okay. Well, very, very interesting. I won't keep you too long. Thank you so much for your time. I have one last thing I would like you to complete a sentence. Let's say if I start a sentence with else you have got to meet dot dot dot, who would you wish I would mention next? Like basically, who would you like to meet and learn from?
Well, the only name that comes up is actually a person in the meditation world,
Yeah, yeah,
because that is, everything I do and all the things I explore are just to grow myself,
yeah.
to become more and more conscious about all the facets of life.
Mhm.
So that's the direction I would choose.
Go into meditation. Good, yeah, good. Thank you so much again for your time. We've learned so much. I'm thinking everybody's listened to this. And of course, looking forward to seeing you soon in person.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.